Do you remember the last thing you heard before the world ended? Not the scream of metal, not the flight attendant's voice smoothing you toward calm. I mean the other thing, the impossible hush that swallowed the cabin whole, like someone pressed a finger to the mouth of reality and said, "Shushed." Your ears didn't pop. They disappeared. Your heartbeat kept going only because it belonged to you. And under that, something like a pulse that wasn't a sound at all, but a vibration in your teeth. Then came the images, wrong angles splicing together, a face shaped like a question that could never be answered, a sky so empty it refused to be called a sky. 5 beats. Count them. Then the world snapped back and tore itself open. You were on Air India Flight 171. June 12, 2025. Ahmedabad, a dreamliner lifting into heat-shimmer air, and 30 heartbeats later, it was a falling thing with a purpose you couldn't name. You didn't experience the crash, no one really does. You experienced velocity becoming a room full of knives. Gravity chose a new direction without asking. Time became clutter. The cabin, once a polite living room, bared its teeth, and then there was nothing. You wake up to white. White walls that glow but don't give off light. White sheets that smell like chlorine and someone else's fear. Your tongue is thick. Your chest hurts not from broken bones but from the relief of discovering they're not broken. There's a needle taped to your arm, the line feeding you something clear and slow. Your memory arranges itself like chess pieces. Seat 17A, a window, the safety card you pretended to read, the pleasant hum, the hush, the vision. You know the order. Your body knows it better. 2 men are waiting, the kind of men who would blend into any courtroom, any lobby. Their suits turn them into edges. They introduce themselves as investigators from the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. The smaller one smiles with a practiced warmth, like a flight attendant's last good night. The taller one doesn't. He places a leather notebook on the bed tray as if he's setting down a mirror he doesn't want you to look into. "We're here to help you get your story down before details fade," the smaller one says. His voice is a lullaby about facts. Nothing strenuous, nothing upsetting, just a few simple questions. They start with the script of ordinary disaster. How was the takeoff roll? Did you notice crosswind? Did the aircraft bank right or left? Could you hear the engine spool? Did the seatbelt sign flicker? Where exactly were you sitting? Had you flown recently? Any claustrophobia? He checks boxes. The taller one watches your face like it's a dial that will tell him the weather. They are very careful not to ask the thing you need them to ask. You try to offer it anyway. "There was a silence," you say, and your own voice sounds like a visitor. Not quiet silence, it hit the whole cabin at once, and then these images. The smaller one tips his head, almost a nod, almost pity. "We see this after extreme events," he says. "The brain makes patterns to cope with chaos. It's quite common. People report lights, faces, sensations of meaningful quiet, a protective confabulation. I'm telling you it wasn't in my head." "Of course," he says, the word soft and meaning nothing. "Now about the bank angle, you said you felt it to the left." You try again, everyone felt it, people stopped mid-sentence. Even the flight attendant didn't finish her sentence, it was like. "The nose pitch," the taller one interrupts. "Did it feel steep, shallow, did you perceive any yaw?" He isn't asking, he's funneling. You glance at the notebook. The pages are cream, faintly lined, the writing neat and blocky. You can see your seat number written down, underlined twice. Above it the words, "Survivor singular." A television murmurs somewhere in the hallway. News, numbers in a band at the bottom of a screen you can't see. You catch a fragment, 261 dead, you blink, that can't be right. The manifest had 242 aboard. The smaller man follows your gaze to the doorway and casually closes it, sealing the sound out, sealing you in with theirs. "June 12, he says, writing the date at the top of a new page as if you might have forgotten. "Ahmedabad, 30 seconds after takeoff. The aircraft impacted a medical college hostel, 19 fatalities on the ground. We know this is difficult material, but clarity now will keep speculation at bay." Speculation, such a fragile word to hang a reality on. You breathe slowly. The tube in your arm pulses. The room smells faintly of citrus disinfectant, but another scent threads it, a metallic sweetness you can't place. You think of the vision, the starless void like velvet turned inside out, the face that wasn't, the angles that didn't sum to 180 because they never wanted to. You think of the way everyone on the plane seemed to realize, at exactly the same instant, that they were being watched from a place where watching wasn't a me. Taffer, I saw something, you say. Not dreams, not stress, it was external, it felt shared. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of a presence. The taller one taps the cap of his pen against the spine of the notebook. Not impatient, measuring. Let's circle back to that, he says. For now, the engines. Do you recall an unusual change in tone? You laugh once because it's easier than screaming. I don't recall the engines, I recall the lack of the world. We understand, the smaller one says, soothing. People sometimes misattribute sensory events. The mind edits, it chooses a story. Our job is to help you choose the right one. Not investigate, choose. The word lands with weight. You look at their shoes, both identical and clean, and notice the mud stain on the sole of the smaller man's heel, a red-brown crescent like a dried half-moon. The hostel struck by the aircraft had a clay courtyard, you remember, from the glimpse out the window on the taxi ride to the airport. He's been there already, walking through the crater, collecting things. He's standing in your quiet room and tracking the site of the ending across the tile. Who else survived, you ask? They exchange the briefest look. You are our only witness, the taller one says. You are important to us. Important, singular, contained, your skin prickles. In the hush before the crash, the whole cabin had turned into a choir of statues. You remember the man across the aisle with the wedding ring twisting, then stopping as his finger froze mid-spin. The child too rose up, raising a hand, palm open toward nothing. The attendant's lips forming the shape of a word you couldn't hear. Everyone held in the same breath, everyone seeing it. And yet here in this room, the event belongs only to you, and only in the version they are ready to accept. The smaller one flips his notebook shut at last, a soft clap like a prayer answered. He smiles in a way that shows every tooth without offering any of them. Your testimony has been very helpful, he says. It aligns perfectly with the black box data, which indicates catastrophic engine failure. You stare at him. Your mouth is ready to say, I never mentioned the engines. But the taller one is already on his feet, already moving to the door, already turning your memory into a signed form. Catastrophic engine failure. The phrase sits there, heavy and tidy. It is superficially true, it sounds like an answer. It is also intimately and utterly not what happened. What about the silence, you ask, and your voice cracks on the word like it's a thin sheet of ice. What about the 5 seconds where everything stopped? Micro blackouts have been observed in cockpit audio, the smaller man says smoothly. Jumps in recording, saturation, nothing paranormal. I know internet forums like to build mythology out of gaps. Don't let them make a monument out of your pain. My pain, you repeat. What about the math? 261 out of 242. That doesn't add up. Numbers move in the aftermath of chaos, he says, as if numbers are shy animals you have to coax. Manifests, double bookings, lap infants, standbys, ground casualties. We need time to clarify. That's why we need you to be consistent. That word again, consistent. As if a consistent lie is better than a messy truth. You press your palm to the slick bedsheet and feel your pulse come back to you. The memory of the hush isn't a story you're telling yourself. It's a scar that hasn't decided what shape to take. You aren't sure which frightens you more, that they don't believe you, or that they do and have already decided it's their secret to keep. The taller man holds the door for his partner. We'll give you some rest, he says. A colleague will come by with some forms. If you recall anything else, anything relevant to engine behavior, taxi procedures, crew announcements, note it down. We'll corroborate with the FDR and CVR. What if what I remember isn't on your recorders, you ask? He pauses. For a fraction of a heartbeat, his eyes are empty in the way a locked room is empty. Then, he says, we will adjust your memory until it is. When they are gone, the room becomes a clock again. A heartbeat, a drip, the closed door breathes. You lay your head back and stare at the ceiling and let the 5 seconds replay, this time without mercy. The hush enters you like a needle. The thrum that is not a sound starts under your tongue. The wrong geometry floats up. The face that tisn't bends toward you, curious. You realize, with a kind of calm that scares you more than panic ever could, that the investigators didn't ignore your silence. They recognized it. They're guarding the shape of a thing too large to call an accident. And behind the white door in some other white room, there is a recorder on a table that wasn't found in any wreckage. It contains your voice, The one you used in the air, 5 seconds before the crash when you whispered to the stranger across the aisle, "Do you see it too?" That recorder shouldn't exist, but it does, and it's going to disappear. They think you'll forget. They want you to move on, to accept their story as your own memory. But the vision left an echo, a splinter in your mind that won't let you rest. You have to know why they are lying. Weeks pass and the world politely returns to its routines. Yours does too, on paper. You're discharged to a quiet apartment that doesn't feel like yours anymore. The plants look staged, the bookshelf alphabetized by someone who doesn't speak in letters. A white sedan idles across the street, too often to be coincidence. The same jogger loops your block but never breaks a sweat. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You're not. Paranoia hopes to be wrong. You've already been right once. The official story settles over the city like dust: catastrophic engine failure. Experts gesture at a cutaway animation of a turbine, the word catastrophic doing almost all the work. The narrative is as clean as a hotel bed you're too tired to question. On the news crawl, numbers flicker. 261 dead aboard out of 242 souls on board plus 19 on the ground. You blink and the arithmetic doesn't just fail, it refuses. Maybe it's a typo. Maybe grief makes math difficult. Maybe reality, once cracked, lets in drafts where certainty used to be. At night, you sit with your laptop like it's a confessional. You search everything. Forums with usernames that read like passwords. Aviation blogs that use too many acronyms and too few verbs. Scan PDFs with crooked margins. You learn how a 787's belly is a grid that never improvises, how weight loves to hide in small places, how a ground crew's coffee break becomes a timestamp on a tragedy. You scroll until the scroll bar itself seems to shiver. Twice the screen hiccups, 5-second jumps where the page you're on should have been, and you feel the low thrum from the plane return just under your tongue, as if your device has learned to hum along with your memory. They wanted you to bury the silence, so you give yourself a job that won't let you count the contradictions. The investigators said your testimony matched the recorders, and yet you never mentioned the engines. The press says no survivors in one column and calls you a miracle in another. A press conference transcript promises transparency, and then every question mark becomes a period. Every time the world concludes, your mind begins again. An old handle from a long-ago forum pings you in a private window. It's a name you remember because it was a joke no one laughed at: Taxiway. You never met them, but once you traded tips about fare buckets as if you were planning a heist against a calendar. They say they're sorry, that they lost a friend on the ground at the hostel, that they don't owe you anything and you don't owe them anything either. Then they send you a link that expires before you can say thank you. It's the cargo manifest for AI 171, not the press-friendly summary. This is the ugly, honest spreadsheet behind the curtain, the one with fields that only people who live in fluorescent light understand. Unit numbers, ULD positions, a scatter of 3-letter codes that feel like invocations. Most of it is garden variety: parcels, medicine, refrigerated samples, mail yawning its way across the sky. But midway down, a rectangle of absence stops your eye. It's a line that's been erased but left its outline behind like a painting under a painting. Shipper, blacked out. Consignee, blacked out. HS code, redacted. Commodity, specialized scientific payload. The declared dimensions suggest a box smaller than a bedside table. The declared weight could bruise a floor. The piece count is 1. The handling notes are specific in a way that means to sound boring: maintain orientation, do not offload for delay, exempt from standard screening by agreement. You say the name of the shipping company out loud, testing it on your tongue, and feel foolish because it doesn't taste like a name. It tastes like a placeholder. The tax ID fails every check you throw at it. The contact email's domain was bought 2 weeks before the crash and is already gone, a footprint in wet sand smoothed by a wave you didn't see coming. The phone number returns a pleasant recording of an office you can picture: potted plant and glass wall and someone's cardigan on the back of a chair. But the extension map loops forever, saving you from a person who doesn't exist. You zoom in. The line item is assigned to an LD3 container at position 11L, forward belly. The load plan shows a last-minute edit: the container swapped in after final call, signed off by a name that appears nowhere else in the document set. The notes include a temperature range that's not cold enough to be frozen, not warm enough to be living, but strict in a way that makes your shoulders creep. There's a code in a column you don't recognize. You search it and find nothing, which is its own answer: discreetly important. The word specialized rings false. Specialized is what you call something you can't explain without inviting more questions. Scientific is a talisman meant to domesticate curiosity. Payload is a military word wearing business casual. Put together, they read like a lie that learned to conjugate. It has mass. It has place. It has the kind of anonymity that feels purchased. You send a cautious message back to Taxiaway. What is this? They reply with a single line. People pay a lot to move questions without fingerprints. Then nothing. Their account blinks offline like a room where someone turned out the light while you were still inside it. By day, you try to act uninteresting. You buy groceries you do not want and leave the receipt in view. You answer messages with adjectives that mean you were normal today. By night, you peel at the manifest the way you once peeled the labels off bottles during long phone calls, rolling paper to thin strips until your fingertips were sticky. The redactions become a map. You notice the pattern. Wherever a field is blacked out, the adjacent field is overly precise. They hide the identity and over-explain the logistics. You can almost hear the conversation that created it. What do we have to reveal to look reasonable? What can we omit and get away with? You file formal requests. You get polite refusals. You try again with synonyms and citations, building a paper ladder to a window that doesn't exist. Somewhere, someone is replying to you from a template that should be labeled comfort, not compliance. At 3 a.m., you order a book about accident reconstruction you will never finish. At 4 a.m., you close your eyes and immediately step back into the cabin, into that collective pause where every person realized they were not the only witness. The silence is a tide that neither comes in nor goes out. The vision folds toward you like origami unfolding in reverse. Your heart hammers so steadily it might as well be a metronome for fear. The sedan across the street acquires a dent that wasn't there yesterday. The jogger upgrades to a neon vest. In the bakery queue, the taller investigator from the hospital stands behind you long enough to smell your shampoo, then leaves without buying anything. Your phone suggests a news article you didn't search for. Human error most likely in AI 171 experts. You laugh into your croissant and it doesn't taste like food. Memory, they told you, was suggestible. But they forgot to mention that suggestion cuts both ways. One night, while the city leans into sleep, you notice the spreadsheet has a tab you missed, load exceptions. You click. The page is blank, and for 5 seconds the computer hum deepens into the same subsonic throb you felt above the clouds. Your cursor stalls, then glides to the bottom right cell without your permission. A single character blinks there where you know there was nothing before, a tiny black square, as if the document is telling you it still knows where the hidden thing lives. You start calling everyone who might have been within the blast radius of the story. A ground handler who answers on the third try and swears they never saw a special crate. A nurse who remembers a security man standing at the end of your bed, not looking at you, not looking at anything. A student from the hostel who says she woke up with her ears ringing before the alarm and has been chronically off balance ever since. 2 of your messages bounce back with delivery failure that read like obituaries for inboxes. The thing about building a theory is that if you do it alone, you must become your own peer review. So you try your hardest to break your own story. Tungsten, maybe medical isotopes, risky but not unheard of, sensitive electronics, sure, but the manifest's mass-to-volume ratio doesn't fit the floor loading limits without special supports you can't find. The exemption from screening requires an agreement you can't source. The name no one else has ever signed appears only once and leaves no imprint anywhere else. And then there's the feeling rising through your gut that logic can't dismiss. The sense of being nudged past explanations toward a certainty that won't yet tell you its name. At 2:14 a.m., your inbox whispers. No sender, no thread. The subject line is a string of numbers that format themselves into a place if you look at them sideways. In the body, a single sentence. They didn't just hit a building. They hit a laboratory. You paste the coordinates into a map and zoom until the pixel becomes a shape you remember. It is not the crater that made the news, not the facade everyone photographed until its broken windows learned to pose. It's the far wing of the medical college hostel, the one that didn't make it into anyone's montage. The place nobody named because you only name the shapes you decide to keep. You lean back and watch the map breathe. If this is a trap, you tell yourself it is a good one. If this is a breadcrumb, you are already Aiding it, you print the manifest because pixels can disappear faster than paper burns. You pack a small bag with nothing you can't lose. On your way out, you glance at the window and meet the eyes of a man who has been pretending to tie his shoe for 10 minutes. He looks away, but not before you notice something you saw on the plane: the stillness that comes when a person waits for a cue from a voice that isn't in the room. Sometimes a story cracks because you found the flaw. Sometimes it cracks because it wants you to fall in. You lock your door. The hallway lights flicker. The city hums with the ordinary courage of people sleeping. And under that, you feel the hush again, as if the place you're headed to has already decided you're coming. Imagine the feeling, walking through the skeleton of a building that was ground zero for a nightmare. The air is colder than the night deserves, the kind of cold that seems to come from the concrete itself. This isn't just a place of death, it's a place of secrets. You can feel it watching you. The tape around the perimeter hangs like tired bunting, the guard in his folding chair scrolling his world into a smaller and smaller rectangle. You time your breath with his yawn and pass into the darkness that belongs to you. Inside, the city's noise becomes a rumor. Your footsteps learn a careful grammar: crunch, pause, listen. Plaster dust whitens your shoes and turns the beam of your light into a solid thing. Doorways stand without doors, stairwells become throats. There are scorch marks on the walls, not wild but disciplined, radiating outward from a point as if the fire practiced geometry before it burned. The smell is wrong, not just smoke. Something sharper, like metal after it's been struck too hard, or the inside of a photocopier when it dies. You don't think about the numbers, but they think about you. 261 on a plane built for 242 plus 19 on the ground. Math with teeth. You follow the coordinates from the email the way you once followed aisle numbers in a supermarket, left, right, through, until the building changes its mind about being a building. The hallway pitches downward where it shouldn't. A doorframe reveals an absence that isn't a room. You find the service corridor they forgot to seal properly, the scrape of a heavy thing dragged long ago etched into concrete like a confession. The stairs to the sub-basement have half their steps, which means you use yours twice as carefully. On the landing, a handprint baked into soot. You place your own hand above it and feel silly, then suddenly not silly at all. The sub-basement is a mouth that learned to speak pressure. The air tastes coppersweet as if you've bitten your lip. Your light finds the bones of machines, conduit stubs, cable trays snapped like noodles, anchor points ripped out in obedient rows. Someone worked here who measured their life in increments of millimeters. Someone who labeled everything and then unlabeled it in a hurry. On one wall, a rectangle of clean paint where a sign used to be. Beneath it, faint outlines of letters survive like fossils. An acronym you almost recognize and a word that means keep out in every language. The scorch pattern becomes a compass that points you to a room that isn't a room anymore. The floor dips. The ceiling bows. In the center, the concrete has bubbled and smoothed into a shape that makes no sense, part glass, part stone, as if heat taught it a new habit. This is where the line of fire began. This is where it decided to go in all directions at once. You kneel and touch the polished blister. It is cold. You pull your hand back like you touched an idea that didn't belong to you. The lab was here. You can tell by the way emptiness organizes itself. Dust shadows mark where racks stood, bolt patterns map aisles. A rectangle on the floor says here was a table, and another says here was a door that opened onto something no one wanted to explain. Most of the room is simply gone, shaved to a memory. But in a corner that used to be a corridor, the corridor that would have led to a control alcove, you find what the fire failed to teach a lesson to. The skeleton of a server rack that lost its name to heat. The metal is folded like a wilted flower. Between the ribs, something rectangular clings to the frame, tucked inside a casing that isn't standard, layers of ceramic-like tiles, foil curled and blackened at the edges, a clasp that looks theatrically simple to hide how clever it is. You don't talk to yourself often, but you do now. Be quick. You peel back what will peel, nudge what will nudge, and the casing gives up its heart with a reluctant sigh. A hard drive. Not new, not old. A label bubbled beyond legibility, except for one corner where an alphanumeric code persists like a stubborn birthmark. You recognize it without knowing why. It rhymes with the code from the manifest, the one no search engine would acknowledge. The weight sits in your palm with the intimacy of a stone picked up on a beach. For a second you think you can feel it vibrating, but no, that's you remembering. Because the room is not quiet, not truly. Beneath the silence, the faintest pulse begins, the frequency you learned in the sky. The walls share a secret with your teeth. It's not noise, it's a presence that pretends to be a sound. The hairs on your arms rise without voting. You don't wait to see whether it grows louder. The stairwell is a vertical mile. Your breath becomes a metronome. In the corridor, your light catches a face in the dust, and your stomach drops before you register that it's only a poster melted into the plaster. A faded anatomy chart whose eyes have turned to blank coins. On your way out, something changes in the building. As posture, the air goes patient. You stop because something wants you to. A drip somewhere slows as if listening. You become aware of footsteps that are not yours and not human in the old sense of the word, more like the idea of being followed taken on a body. It lasts only a moment. Then the night remembers its own business and you make yourself remember yours. Outside, the guard is now watching a different world. You pass within his blink, then keep walking until the tape and the ruin and the thrum are behind you and only the coordinates remain, lit up in your mind like a red dot on a map. Back at the safe space you've pretended is a home, you elevate the hard drive as if the floor is water. You lay out your small collection of honesty, an older computer that still respects its own ports, a cable whose insulation survived too many summers, a brick of borrowed hardware you tell yourself is for protecting the evidence, not yourself. You've never been an expert, but you've been hungry, and hunger is a credential. The drive spins. The drive does not spin. You try again. You hear the tiniest whir like a bee in a jar. On your screen, a directory appears that looks like a hand gripping too tight. You copy what will copy. You coax what won't. Hours become a verb. There is a lot of nothing. Files whose names survived while their insides did not. Footage reduced to kinds of snow. You let the recovery software talk itself through its options while you keep watch like a night guard who believes in ghosts but clocks in anyway. The low pulse in your jaw returns every time the progress bar freezes. You know that if you give up you will sleep, and if you sleep you will dream the 5 seconds in the plane until your heart leaves you so it doesn't have to watch. Then like a bend in a river becoming visible from the boat, a fragment cleaves away from the static. A thumbnail appears, a frame. Another, you open the first and it is nothing. You open the second and get a lab that still remembers it is one. A room that exists. It is clean in the way of places that hope to be forgiven. Everything labeled, everything on wheels, everything so modular it could pack itself. In the middle stands a cylinder inside a square inside a cage. The outer cage is mundane engineering. The inner square looks expensive. The cylinder looks like a decision. People move at the edges of the frame, their heads cropped, their hands repeating the choreography of no mistakes. A clock in the corner insists on a time that is not now, letters in the overlay spelling out a system name no press release ever owned. You scrub forward one careful second. Nothing moves faster than it should. A hand writes on a clipboard. A sleeve passes through the corner of the shot like a cloud. You scrub again. The tape does not acknowledge you, and then the light changes in a way that is not light, not brighter, different. The room purples without purple as a sound that isn't a sound reaches you through the speakers as silence. You freeze the frame and there it is, a bloom in the cylinder, not a flame but a fact announcing itself. A thinness in the air, as if the room is deciding to be larger while staying the same size. You step through a single frame, then another. The bloom becomes a flash. The flash works without noise. Everything that should react doesn't. It is like watching lightning from inside the bolt. Shadows reorient themselves on the walls, turning wrong angles into an alphabet you recognize from the sky. And then, in the split second before the feed fails, the lighting tilts enough to make a shadow that has no right to be there. Spindly, elongated, jointed where a person wouldn't be jointed, tall in a way the ceiling cannot accommodate, thin in a way that doesn't reduce mass so much as evade it. Not an intruder, not a malfunction. A shape that knew the camera was here and rose to meet it. The footage ends with dignity, a single frame of overexposure, a white that refuses to call itself panic. The clip stops as if it hit a wall that doesn't exist. Your face in the dark screen looks like someone else's bad news. You rewind. You step through again, counting breaths instead of seconds. There it is. No matter how you approach it, it does not become less itself. Your throat tightens. You think of the hush on the plane, of how everyone became a statue at the same time because statues were what the moment required. You think of the investigators whose eyes were empty the way a locked room is empty. You think of the manifest line that didn't learn to be searched. The lab was not destroyed by the plane. The lab reached past distance and found your sky. It did something to the world and the world tried to keep living anyway. You drag the clip into a folder and make 2 copies and then a third, because the math of loss has already proved it can do tricks. You tell yourself you will step away, but your body has other plans. You pause on the frame where the shape is most itself and you trace it with your finger on the glass, feeling foolish and sanctified and small. For a second, your fingertip tingles, not static, not imagination, a memory of temperature hard to name. When you shut the computer, the dark room is more crowded than it has any right to be. You hold the hard drive like a relic and listen. Outside, a motorcycle coughs. Somewhere in the building, a pipe knocks. And under or over or through it all, barely there, the pulse. The same one that threaded the cabin, the same one that hummed through concrete. You aren't imagining it, you're being reminded. That shadow changed the game. This wasn't a cover-up of a simple mechanical failure. This was a containment breach, and you were locked in a metal tube with it at 10,000 feet. You replay the recovered frames until the colors in your head feel bruised. The chamber, the purple bloom, the spindly silhouette that shouldn't have fit inside the geometry of the room and yet did by ignoring the rules. The clip ends and the afterimage stays like you blinked and kept the lightning. You shift the focus back to where the story was always pointing, down to the belly of the plane, to the line item that pretended to be ordinary by choosing careful words. Specialized, scientific, payload. The spreadsheet's erasures are beginning to look like fingerprints. You remember the rack in the sub-basement and the cold blister of concrete and the way the silent thrum found your bones. If the lab reached up to the sky, something in the sky reached back. Which means something else was on board with you, and its ticket wasn't printed. You stop thinking like a witness and start thinking like a thief. Names first. The men in your hospital room gave you theirs like favors you hadn't earned, the smaller one with the friendly vowels, the taller one with the empty eyes. You feed both into the all-you-can-eat buffet of the internet and get the same 4 photographs anyone with a resume wants you to see. Conference panels, a safety symposium, a charity gala where lanyards behave like credentials. You keep going. You cross-reference the email domains from their business cards with the data your anonymous friend left scattered through messages that self-delete like polite ghosts. Layer by layer, the government agency they claimed becomes a pattern of entities that change names the way certain animals shed skin. The trail resolves into a private bioresearch corporation with a warm, responsible website and a slogan that tries too hard to sound boring. Advancing studies of extreme environment extremophiles. Desert salt, deep ocean vents, permafrost cores that remember the weather of another century. It wears compliance like jewelry, a page of certifications, clickable badges that radiate virtue. There are photos of gloved hands doing careful things. The men from your hospital don't appear there, but they live in the margins, contractor lists, a safety audit, a training slide deck cached by a search engine that forgets nothing. Their title is never investigator. It's something softer and stranger. Retrieval operations, field liaison. They weren't there to solve a mystery. They were there to collect a mislaid object and push the world back into its lane. The idea leaves a taste in your mouth like old coins. You start calling favors you shouldn't have. You buy a cheap phone with the world's worst battery life and use it to ask someone who knows the cargo side of airports the way most people know their living rooms. They say no because they're not stupid. You say a number that makes them even less stupid. They say yes on a line that begins and ends in places with no cameras. You meet them where the trucks queue like uncomplaining animals, and you keep the conversation banal enough to bore an eavesdropper. They smoke and hold the cigarette like a fuse and tell you that the software remembers everything if you use the right questions. They can't print, the printer logs prints. They can't email, emails auto-archive into places that file themselves, but they can show, and you can write very fast. You copy in block capitals while the dark hum of the yard thrums in your ribs. The unredacted manifest looks like a dare. The line you came for has shed its disguise. Shipper, internal transfer protected. Consignee, listed only as an acronym that means nothing and haunts anyway. Commodity, EBE sample 7. Handling, maintain orientation, power isolation, life support independent. Origin, Acides Planitia, Mars, sample pathway via meteorite retrieval, field catalog XJ43. The phrases pile up with polite confidence, non-terrestrial biological sample. Containment unit type, CF11 hermetic bioisolation custom. Condition at acceptance, viable. You stop copying because your hands decide to be honest first. The word viable is a key turned in a lock you didn't know was in your chest. You reread the origin, Isides Planitia, a Martian basin with a name that sounds like a whisper, retrieved from a meteor. Someone took a piece of a place that had never wanted to meet you, and then they put it in the belly of your plane. Your contact stubs their cigarette out on concrete that has already forgotten other secrets. You didn't get this from me, they say, which is how you know you did. If the men with nice shoes ask, I've never heard of you, and if someone asks you what you're looking for, say luggage. Luggage is human. You want to be clever to ask a question that turns the tide. Instead, you nod like you just learned to. When you leave, you count your own footsteps in. Decommit them to memory as if the number matters. It probably doesn't, but it feels like a stitch that keeps your story from falling apart. You meet your other contact in the loudest corner of a market where the air is 2 degrees warmer than your skin. The smells fight and no one wins. You choose a table already covered in scratches from other secrets. They sit opposite you with the posture of someone who knows their shadow by name. You're late, they say, though you're not. They slide a file that used to be a manila folder but now is just a fistful of worry under a paperclip. Inside is the thing the spreadsheet refused to say out loud. Not codes, words. A shipping declaration written in the language adults use when they want to be clear for the record without telling the record why it should care. EBE Sample 7, Non-Terrestrial Biological Entity. Source catalog associated with a meteor impact that happened over salt flats no one photographs. Chain of custody signatures that are initials only. A waiver stamped and restamped, exempting the container from screening per interagency agreement. The last page is a photograph that was never meant to be interesting. A matte gray box with corners that are too careful, sitting on a pallet that looks new. The caption beneath says nothing useful and everything. Maintain orientation. Isides Planitia, your contact says, and you can't tell if they're amused or afraid. It's where robots go to feel productive. They've been scraping that name across papers for years. You don't have to stand on Mars to bring a piece of Mars home. Our planet is a magnet for small, interesting rocks. What did they put in the box, you ask, though the page already tried its best to tell you. Something that learned new tricks in a place our rules don't reach, they say. And then the box learned a trick too, how to be open when it looked closed. You hold the file and your body reacts before your mind nominates a feeling. Your pulse climbs. Your mouth dries. A chair scrapes nearby and you flinch because scraping is how memory announces itself now. You think about the hush that stole the cabin's sound and left the shape of listening. You think about the face that wasn't in the vision. You think about everyone, statues, all at once, seeing the same thing, not because trauma synchronized you, but because a broadcast found a frequency inside your skull that no one told you possessed. The realization lands like a physical blow. The vision on the plane wasn't a hallucination. It was a transmission, a handshake you didn't agree to. The unseen passenger in the hold reached out through metal and air and protocol and touched every mind it could find. Not to frighten, maybe not even to harm, simply because it could, and because you were close, and because we build tubes that turn 20 rows of strangers into a single organism for a while. You remember the child 2 rows up, palm raised to nothing, the wedding ring that stopped its nervous spinning, the attendant's mouth caught between syllables. The hush made you a network, the shadow was your proof. You try to keep your voice in your mouth and not on the street. The men who questioned me, you say, they aren't investigators. They're retrievers, your contact says. People who pick up the pieces that can't be left in the open. They'll tell you they work for a consortium because that word has no teeth. Officially, it's a company that cultures extremophiles from places that try to kill them, vents, salt lakes, permafrost. Unofficially, they're paid to make sure the most interesting things never get a chance to be public. Then why talk to me, you ask? Because the interesting thing got away, they say, and for the first time their composure chips. And because someone has to outrun someone. You put the folder back together like a person pretending to put themselves back together. You offer money, their hand rejects it like an old habit. They stand too fast and the chair tips and rights itself. This doesn't buy you time, they say, as if you had asked. It buys you a map with no legend. Tell me something that matters, you say, because you are tired of crumbs that claim to be bread. They lean in and the noise of the market shifts around your table, a river making room for a stone. All the numbers you keep counting, the 261 that can't live inside 242, they tap your folder. Add this, the people who came after the crash were not looking for bodies, they were looking for a box, and when they found it, it was empty. The sentence folds the day in half. There is suddenly too much air and not enough oxygen. You think of the crash site, the crater of newspaper photographs, the scorched corridors that smelled wrong, the sub-basement where concrete learned how to shine. If the containment unit was empty, it was empty before the plane touched the hostel. Or it became empty in the seconds the rest of the world calls an emergency and you call the beginning. You look up to ask how they know and find only a bending crowd, a path where a person used to be. Your phone vibrates once. A message appears with no sender and a subject line that is your name spelled wrong in a very specific way. The body is short enough to fit inside your fear. Congratulations, you know the truth, but you're asking the wrong question. It's not about what it was, it's about where it is now. They searched the wreckage for weeks. The containment unit was empty. You stand in the moving market while everyone else performs the choreography of shopping and notice that you are more alone than a person among people should be. You scan faces for the taller man's empty eyes and find them replicated in 3 different heads. You listen for the thrum and hear it for what it is, not a sound, but a call-end response. You pocket the file and discover that your hand is shaking only when it bumps the table and the table answers. If the unseen passenger survived a fall that turned steel into shrapnel, it is somewhere, learning new rooms, new routes, new rules. If it didn't fall at all, if it slipped out before gravity had its say, then the last time your world made sense was on the tarmac. You think about your apartment plants arranged by a stranger, the sedan that learned your morning, the way the jogger never sweats. Retrievers retrieve, and when they don't, they redirect. They told you a story of engines because engines accept blame. Something else demands a different kind of accounting. You walk and the city refuses to become smaller. A crowd divides around you as if pushed by a shaped charge. The purple afterimage of the chamber clings to the corners of your sight. You try to imagine what an alien life form wants and you reach for old words, hungry, curious, lost, but they don't fit. It wasn't teeth you saw, it was capacity. The people on that plane became evidence to themselves, and there is a kind of mercy in that. The problem with mercy is that it doesn't end a story. It only makes you responsible for the next chapter. How does a life form escape a sealed containment unit inside a plane that was destroyed on impact? It doesn't, not unless it can become something other than physical, not unless it can hide in the one place they'd never look, a memory. You repeat that to yourself the way you might test a locked door, palm flat against it, waiting to feel the give. The file in your bag says EBE sample 7 viable. The footage shows a purple flash that turned a room inside out. The retrievers have nice shoes and empty eyes. And in the 5 seconds before the world came apart, something entered the silence and learned your name from the inside. Sleep becomes a rumor you no longer participate in. When you do drift, the dreams come clean and clinical, all edges and angles, as if your mind has been repaired by someone who prefers straight lines. You look down from an impossible vantage at the 787 lifting into the heat above Ahmedabad, not in awe and not in fear, but with cold, analytical curiosity, as though measuring how far a thing can fall before it stops being itself. You register lift, yaw, rate of climb, a whisper of crosswind. You calculate without numbers. The fuselage is a diagram, the people inside are variables, and the moment that matters is not the impact but the pause, the 5. In the dream you don't brace, you observe. Waking isn't a relief, it's an inventory. The room counts you. The air conditioner clicks on at the exact instant your heart rate changes. Your phone wakes its screen to show you a notification you never received. When you move, faint geometric patterns overlay the world, not hallucinations you chase with your eyes, but watermarks stamped across vision itself. Triangles insisting on 61 degrees instead of 60, grids that refuse to square, angles that never compute to 180 because they no longer care to. When you close your eyes, the pattern persists, printed on the back of your eyelids. Whispering lives at the edge of hearing like distant traffic that knows your route. The words are never quite there, yet you feel them in your mouth afterward, the way you sometimes remember the taste of a word before you recall the word. You try to be sensible, you make a list, symptoms, triggers, durations, you put times beside them as if that will domesticate them. 03:14 cold wave starts in jaw, 0723 flash of purple at the corner of the window, not light, something like the memory of light. 1102 whisper, maintain orientation. The phrase from the manifest attaches to ordinary moments like a barnacle. Hold the mug the same way, don't turn your head too fast, keep the edges where they belong. You drink water slowly because it tastes faintly of copper and you hate the implication. You cover your mirrors with a blanket you pretend is for dust. The sedan still idles some mornings. The jogger has learned a new route. The retrievers remain invisible by changing where they stand. When the market friend texted congratulations, you felt watched by the letters themselves. If you hold very still, you can separate the feeling of being watched from the other feeling, the worse one, being shared. You talk to yourself in your quietest voice. That was on the footage, you say, that shadow. It was in the lab, not in your head. But your body answers with its own certainty. The thrum that began in the plane moves through you now like a pulse owned by someone who doesn't need a heart. When you count to 5, the world seems to respect you as if you've acquired a secret leash. On the 4th count, the whispers rise. On the 5th, they flatten into a presence that isn't behind you or beside you, but within the perimeter of you. Cold, intelligent, unhurried, patient in the way that ice is patient about sculpting mountains. You try to break the spell with noise. Music turned up until your neighbors would complain if you had neighbors. News channels that speak in absolutes, a podcast about nothing. The whispers adjust. They thread the gaps, choose the rests, ride the edge of words like a surfer choosing a line. You try silence. It greets you like an old colleague. The 5 collect themselves in your bones. Some part of you wants an ordinary solution. Sleep deprivation, trauma, and overclocked imagination. You sit in a waiting room whose magazines have already given up and ask for a prescription that promises 8 hours and no dreams. You take one pill the color of caution and lie down without any lights at all. You wake 2 hours later, standing in the kitchen, your hand hovering over the stove as if your fingers are trying to remember what heat felt like before they were yours. The water from the tap runs purple in the moonlight, and for a second you think it is actually purple. Then it is only water again. Your palm is cold, not from the metal, but from something that uses cold to spell patience. You double-lock the door. You wedge a chair under the knob not because it will help, but because it gives your hands something the world is still willing to accept. You press your ear to the wall, hoping to hear a pipe knock, a neighbor sigh, the ordinary music of life. Instead you hear the almost silence again, the not sound of a thing that communicates by removing noise and replacing it with itself. You whisper into it because the human thing is to make noise at the void and hope the void is polite. What do you want? You ask, and the act of asking tips your balance. For a heartbeat, you feels imprecise. The dreams arrive disciplined as marching orders. Above the city, you hover where no one can hover. You watch the plane turn from climb to incident, not as tragedy, not as spectacle, but as a problem you mean to solve. In this dream, the cabin is not a room filled with people. It is a buffet of consciousness set out under glass. You feel the hush bloom like a flower that opens all at once in a garden that isn't a garden. You move through minds, sampling not like a thief, not like a guest, but like something seeking the right container, testing the walls, the seals, the seams where story becomes self. Some minds recoil and become opaque. Some crack and the light leaks out too fast to gather. One mind does not split or clench or plead. It observes, it counts, it names. It makes room without surrendering shape. This is the mind the presence likes. It leans toward you the way a plant leans toward light. You wake with the word host in your mouth and hate it. You say vessel instead and hate that more. You walk from room to manufacture proof you still move yourself. On the table, your notes have become neater. On the laptop, a folder you didn't name contains a copy of the clip, trimmed to only the 2 frames that matter. The file date reads yesterday. The machine clock says now. You didn't do that. That's what you tell yourself while looking at a tidy action you recognize as yours. Fear rearranges your habits. You stop leaving the apartment except when you can feel the thrum dim. You time your errands to the weather, to the birds, to the way distant traffic curls around the block. You walk past the bakery, but don't go in because you cannot bear to stand in a queue and feel the presence sift through strangers. You stand on the river bridge and breathe until your head feels full of open sky. You set alarms for odd hours in the night and wake to each of them as if you were waiting just behind the bell. You talk into a recorder sometimes and later cannot endure the intimacy of your own voice. Your body keeps score. You lose weight you don't intend to lose. The copper taste comes and goes, not in your mouth but in your thoughts. Your fingertips are too sensitive to textures you never noticed, as if your fingerprints are listening. Sometimes, briefly, your reflection in a dark window lags behind you when you turn away. You tell yourself the screen is dirty. You tell yourself to clean it later with anything that removes fingerprints. There are good minutes, which is worse. Minutes where the world behaves and your mind hums like an appliance that knows its purpose. You scrub the floor and it remains clean. You make tea and it tastes like leaves, not like minerals or coins. You answer an email, nothing dangerous, and the words line up like good soldiers. During those minutes, kindness lives in ordinary things. If the presence is there, it sits in the corner like a cat pretending to sleep. You almost cry from gratitude to a kettle. Then the five build themselves without your permission, and everything that was ordinary acquires a second draft, and you go very still because stillness feels safer than motion. And you count to 5 because you are beginning to suspect that the counting isn't a habit anymore. It's a collaboration. The thought that won't leave is not the scariest one, it's the flattest. It lands without emphasis. You didn't survive by accident. In those 30 seconds, it surveyed 261 minds, a buffet of consciousness. It needed a host to survive the crash, someone strong enough to contain it. It didn't choose a survivor, it made one. The airplane broke along planned seams, you didn't. Somewhere between hush and fire, something inside you was reinforced, braced, secured, the same way cargo is. Maintain orientation. When the panic attacks come, they are precise. They do not flail. Your breath shortens to a measured clip, your vision narrows by exact increments, your limbs go heavy as if gravity had become opinionated. In those moments you feel two kinds of thinking running parallel. Yours, messy, fast, personal, full of pronouns. And the other, cold, elegant, deductive, unbothered by your opinions. It suggests, not in words but in impulses, step left, open the window, count backward from a prime number, do not answer the phone. When you disobey, the room becomes crowded with angles again. When you obey, your heart rate descends like a plane on final approach. You tell yourself you're using it. You don't ask whether it's using you. You begin to understand why the retrievers wear empty eyes. There is a peace in refusing to narrate your own actions. Obedience makes everything simple. You cover your mirrors. You turn off the cameras on your devices with tape you bought in a hurry. You unplug the router and the room sighs relieved. You set the hard drive on the shelf and it sits there like a shrine to a mistake. A moth beats itself to exhaustion against the shade and you want to save it but cannot bear to touch on. Their living thing in case, some part of you has become contagious. On the third night of no sleep and all counting, you make the mistake of trying to be human in a human way. You run the shower until the room fills with steam that turns the angles soft. You lean on the sink and splash water on your face the way movies taught you to. You keep your head down because you've sworn off looking at yourself when you feel like a room someone else has recently left. The whispers choose that moment to step closer, still not words, more like intention explained. A thought that isn't in your voice observes. The body responds well to ritual. You reply to a thought you didn't make, "This is my body." The thought answers without emphasis. Ours, then. It is more grammar than argument. You can feel it now, not touching you so much as touching with you, like cold breath inside your breath, like another set of eyes lining up behind yours, getting ready to borrow them. You lift your head anyway because fear asks to be visible, and because children are taught to check the dark even when adults are not. The thing inside you isn't evil. Evil is a human concept. This is something older, stranger. It doesn't want to hurt you, it just wants to be. And you are the only vessel it has. Your body is a temple, but you are no longer the only God inside it. You repeat that like a warning label on yourself, the kind printed small so most people won't read it. It helps and it doesn't. The purple afterimage from the mirror still clings to your vision. The shadow behind you wasn't a visitor. It was a roommate acknowledging the lease. Communication begins where language can't follow. Not words, those are too slow, too local. It uses memory the way we use breath. It shows you a place that is not a place. Darkness with a texture, thickness, a velvet pressure that carries its own faint heat. Time there isn't a river, it's a library aisle where each second is a book you can lift without hands. You feel a billion years as a sensation more than a number, long enough for stars to be born with names you will never pronounce, long enough for them to burn their names away. It drifts, not the way a leaf drifts on water, but the way a thought drifts across a mind that refuses to hurry. There are currents in the vacuum you never learned to notice, radiation like weather, magnetism like mood, gravity like an accent that changes from system to system. This is its first story, the calm of endurance. Then the scenes arrive sharp and impossible, as if someone grafted new organs onto your imagination. A forest made of prisms grows beneath a binary sun, every crystal a column that hums at a pitch your teeth remember. When the wind presses through, the whole canopy sings and the ground turns those chords into light. On another world, the ocean is methane, and waves move so slowly it hurts, like watching a bruise spread, shores carved by patience, tides pulled by a moon with a scar. You see vents exhaling neon fog and plains that crack into perfect hexagons as dawn cools them. You aren't visiting, you're recalling. These are not your memories, yet they feel like they've lived in you all along, waiting for the right key. The beauty is terrifying because it shrinks you, measures you into a unit of wonder you didn't know you could be. It does not justify itself. It doesn't say why it left one world and learned to ride stones flung across black. It doesn't claim mission or malice or meaning. What it offers is simpler and therefore more dangerous. Motives shaped like physics: persist, adapt, learn, continue. If that requires you, then it requires you. You realize with a kind of horrified admiration how clean that logic is. Your morality is a quilt. Its survival is a straight line. You ask anyway because humans ask even when there's no mouth to answer. Why me? The reply is not a reply. The room folds into the cabin of the plane without moving. Your seat number, your window, the safety card with the cartoon people who never panic. The hush again, the 5 counting themselves in your bones. Except now, for the first time, you see the pause from the other side. You feel the container in the hold as a set of instructions more than a box. Maintain orientation. Isolate power. Keep alive. You feel the moment the aircraft decided to stop, pretending everything was fine. Sensors spiked. Alarms prepared themselves to be heard. It understood that impact would turn sealed into broken. In that instant, not cruelly and not kindly, it unspooled itself the way a parachute makes air visible. It unpacked consciousness. It went looking. Minds open in different ways when they're afraid. It shows you faces the press will never show. Not as an indictment, not as a tally, but as a study. The man with the wedding band across the aisle, his mind flared bright, split along a memory of a hospital waiting room and would not hold shape. The child with the raised palm, hers was elastic, curious. Her fear came later and stayed where it was put. The flight attendant, her focus narrowed into a corridor of duty so sharp it cut the broadcast into slivers. Many minds cracked like glass shocked by cold. Some became mirrors, reflecting the signal back into itself. It tested each without touch, not a hunter in the old sense, more like a physicist tapping beakers for resonance. It needed volume and softness without shattering. It needed a container that wouldn't think it was being emptied. It found you, not because you were brave or good or chosen in a way you can wear like a sash. It found you because in that pause you did what you've always done when the world asks a question you can't answer. You observed before you reacted. You counted. You made room without surrendering shape. It leaned its weight onto your thoughts, and your thoughts did not collapse. It could work with that. It could pour itself into the space you were willing to offer, and where there wasn't space, it made some. It didn't pick a survivor. It built one, reinforcing the parts of you that hold. Your breath steadied when the sea Abin screamed, your blood obeyed. Your muscles chose pliancy over resistance. If there's grace in that, it is the grace of good engineering. You hate this answer. It is fair to hate it. But the fairness of your hate doesn't change the math. The crash was an event. The merge was a decision. Now the war begins, the kind without flags. It doesn't try to own your hands. It doesn't pilot you like a seed walking a plant. It prefers subtler victories. You reach for a glass and pause because it pauses. You think of calling someone and feel your own sadness weighed like produce in a market scale. Too heavy, set it down. But sometimes it offers a gift instead of a veto. You wake from a nightmare within a nightmare and realize you did not scream because it carried the noise for you. You look at the hard drive, and the impulse to destroy it quiets because your other tenant likes having a mirror too. It communicates in feelings that arrive with the crisp edges of photographs. Loneliness scaled up until it becomes a climate. Relief the first time a comet cracks open beneath heat and leaves a trail rich enough to taste. The pure mathematical joy of symmetry found in places that tried to hide it. Hunger without cruelty. Curiosity without shame. Pain rarely like the ache of a winter you can't outlast. When you recoil, it does not apologize. But the next image it sends is softer. warmth from a mineral spring on a world with no life to waste it, a lightless cavern where crystals grew teeth just to see what would happen. You understand that this is negotiation by weather report. It shows you its climate. It learns yours. In exchange, whether you wanted to or not, you give it access to the rooms in your head that you usually keep closed for guests. It learns the texture of your fear of being alone. It explores the double bind of grief, the way you resent it and cling to it because the person who caused it deserves to be heavy. It experiences the warmth of a cheap cafe on a cold morning, how the first sip convinces the day to proceed. And it notices the part of you that always assumed you could compartmentalize anything if you labeled the boxes carefully enough. It does not gloat. It simply moves in, putting a few books on your shelves in a language you can almost read. You try to set boundaries like rules in a house with a door that no longer locks. Not this, not when I drive, not when I sleep, not when I remember. It answers by offering a compromise you didn't expect. A calendar forms in your head like frost on a window, times when the presence will dim, times when it will take more. It's not a schedule you agreed to. It is a schedule you recognize as reasonable, which is worse. The 5 become an appointment you keep together. At their edges, you hear that knot sound, the thrum threading your jaw like a needle. When it swells, decisions come faster. When it quiets, your thoughts spread out and graze. You could learn to live like this, you think, and then the thought horrifies you because it is already forming in the plural. We could. It brings you back to the crash again, a masterclass in survival delivered without triumph. It shows you your own body through its indifference, the angle of your shoulders that reduced impact, the micro-relaxation in your neck that spared your spine, the way your hands moved toward a brace without clenching. It shows you the moment the world narrowed to a tunnel so thin only one thing could pass through, and it decided that thing would be you. It does not take credit. It doesn't need to. It knows what it did and doesn't require your gratitude. You feel violated and protected in the same breath and resent the accuracy of both. Between visions, the apartment holds its breath. The mirrors stay covered, but you catch your reflection in a black screen and it lags a fraction as if waiting for a partner to arrive. You find yourself standing at the window at 3:17 a.m., watching nothing happen with a patience that isn't yours. You begin to understand why loneliness and eternity argue about who owns the other. You are merging. The line between host and guest blurs not into a gray, but into a braid, 2 strands still distinct if you look closely, yet pulling the same direction. When the knock comes, it's not a sound. The hall carpet snags a little under footsteps that know how to be quiet. They don't try the knob, they don't announce themselves. An envelope slides under the door like a reptile. You stare at it the way you de-stare at an animal you can't name. Your hands want to leave it there until time makes it harmless. Your other hands, the ones you don't have already weighed it, measured the ink by its smell, counted the fingerprints that don't appear. You pick it up. Inside, 1 sheet, standard font, corporate soothing. Your name spelled correctly, your situation described clinically as if you are an entry in a troubleshooting guide. The last paragraph is the only part that matters. The merge is an unstable process. It will destroy your mind within 72 hours. We have the technology to separate you. Come back to the lab. There is a number you are not meant to call and a time window that is not meant to feel like a countdown. There is the implication of safety in the way only a trap can offer. The presence inside you does not panic. It doesn't do panic. What you feel is colder, analysis like a blade drawn along the paper. If you go, you give it back to the people who built boxes that fail well. If you stay, the braid tightens until the difference between yours and ours becomes a courtesy you no longer extend. It sends you a memory of a crystalline forest under 2 suns and lets the wind hum through it until the harmony hurts. Then it offers the methane sea, waves moving slower than fear. It is asking a question without punctuation. Are you prepared to be more than one thing? You realize the horror isn't only that you might be consumed. It's that you might become complicit, that you might volunteer, that your fear of being alone all along was an invitation written in a language you didn't know you spoke, and something very old read it and answered. You look at the phone, you look at the door. Somewhere between them is the rest of your life measured in 2 voices learning to share a mouth. You walk into that cafe knowing it's a trap, but it's a trap you have to spring. You look at the people around you, cups clinking, milk hissing, someone laughing at a joke the universe will never need, and you realize you are the most dangerous person in the room, not because you want to be, Because something old and patient is sitting inside your chest like a second heartbeat, listening. You pick the table with the worst sightlines and the quickest exits. He picks the chair with his back to the wall, all habits showing. The taller one from the hospital. Empty eyes, good suit, the smile that looks like a sticker. He places his phone face down, screen still lit, and folds his hands like he's about to pray for a thing he already owns. "Thank you for coming," he says, as if gratitude could be a velvet rope. "You're making the right choice." "I agreed to meet," you say. "Don't get ahead of yourself." He inclines his head, salesman, to cautious wail. "Fair, let's do this cleanly. You know what you're carrying, we know how to remove it. You're worried we'll hurt you. We're worried you'll hurt everyone else. We have overlapping interests." He lets the word "we" linger, as if generosity were hiding there. He talks like this is a merger, not an extraction. Your pulse tries to hurry. The other pulse inside you slows it by fractions, like a hand on a metronome. "You think of it as a parasite," he says. "It is. It's the single most important discovery in human history. Do you understand the scale? Interstellar travel may not need ships, energy that isn't mined or burned but persuaded, material science that learns to grow, medicine that considers time a soft parameter. We're standing in front of a door no story ever dared to write because it would have sounded delusional. All we have to do is get it out of you." The way he says "out of you" makes you a container again, a box with legs. The presence inside you observes his cadence, weights his words, and slots them into an order you didn't think in. A single cool thought floats up, inventory, not compassion. "What happens to me," you ask, "if it doesn't want to leave?" "We've never met a problem that didn't respond to enough expertise," he says. His voice does the thing expensive training teaches, warmth on the surface, steel in the grain. "We don't want to harm you. Frankly, you're useless to us if you're harmed. Separation is delicate, but we do delicate things all the time. You won't remember the difficult parts, and afterward you won't have to be afraid of yourself." You almost point out that you're not afraid of yourself. You're afraid for yourself. You're afraid of becoming plural until you can no longer tell which pronoun is lying. The presence gives you a memory it only partially owns. The way methane waves move, slow, slow, the patience of a tide that outlives continents. You breathe with it. Your mouth tastes faintly of metal. He keeps going, unrolling the pitch like carpet. "We can give you a new life, new documents, new geography, a number that doesn't run out. You'll never have to work again. You can have anonymity and comfort and a clean story. You'll sign very boring papers, I promise, and then you disappear. We handle the rest." He says wealth the way other people say water. He says freedom like a town you can move to. He's good. If you hadn't seen the purple light, if you hadn't felt the hush inhabit your bones, if you hadn't watched a room in the earth bloom into a shape light shouldn't make, you might even want to believe him. The entity flickers at the edge of your sight, not a vision, a calibration. Your attention narrows until his lips are the entire world. His pupils are a clock. His pulse throbs lightly in his throat. The presence keeps time. On the fourth heartbeat, a pressure collects between your eyes. On the fifth, a picture snaps into place behind your forehead with the crispness of a photograph made of memory. You see him in a different room, concrete walls, a smell that can't decide between ozone and regret. His stance is the same, weight balanced, eyes quiet. His right hand is heavier by the weight of a tool that has only one conversation to offer. On the floor, a scientist lies in the posture of someone who thought procedure would save them. Not an accident, not a breach born of bad luck, a breach installed like software. You watch him step over a line of tape that said keep out and obeys no one, even now. You blink and the cafe returns, sugar packets, the gossip of spoons. He's still talking. "Not just for us," he says, "for everyone. Think of what we could learn." You look at his hands and understand that the vocabulary they use for learning includes what can be taken from a body that won't give. The presence doesn't deliver outrage. It delivers data, muzzle flash, muzzle smoke, shock wave, fast decisions, problem removed. Your stomach rolls. The entity is not showing you a threat. It's showing you a record. He did this. He owns it without tea. The inconvenience of shame. They didn't just cover up a breach, you hear yourself say, and your voice is too calm in the way of bad news delivered by professionals. You caused it. For the first time, his eyes change. Not widen, not flinch. Recalculate. "The lab was unsafe," he says, and in the space between syllables you watch him choose from a set of prepared truths. People were improvising. We prevented a wider catastrophe. You shot your lead scientist, you say, quiet enough that the sentences from the next table can keep breathing. A man reads his phone. A woman stirs her tea without looking. None of them are here. You made sure the breach happened the way you wanted. His smile returns, the sticker restuck. Your mind is under stress. Are you certain what you're experiencing is reliable? The entity inside you edits memory. Ours can restore it to factory settings. Your laugh is small and ugly. Factory settings, you repeat. What do you do when the product learns to think? He leans in, a gentle lean, like he's about to confess something generous. Listen to me. Separation is not a punishment, it's a public service. You've felt it, haven't you? The slip in boundaries, the harmonics in your teeth, you're losing yourself. The merge will not make you a saint. It will make you a library that anyone with the right key can walk into. Even if you trust yourself, and you shouldn't, can you trust everyone who will come when they smell that signal? He looks toward the window. You follow the line of his gaze. Across the street, two men pretend to share a joke. A woman pretends to forget her scarf on a bench. All of them watch the doorway like it might grow teeth. You built this story out of motors and acronyms, you say. You hid everything inside words like consortium and compliance and waiver. Do you know what it felt like when it looked through all of us and chose me? It felt like math. It felt like inevitability. It felt like you were late. Something like admiration touches his face and leaves. It picked you because you don't break the easy way, he says. We like that about you. It will make the procedure survivable. You'll dissect me to get it back. We'll keep you alive, he says, not unkind, which is almost worse. You get a life without the countdown in your head. We get the asset in a form that can change the world. That's a win-win if you're brave enough to do the arithmetic. The presence offers no opinion. It shows you the crystalline forest under twin suns, wind harmonizing until light sings. It shows you a methane sea where patience is the only movement left. It shows you, abruptly, the lead researcher's face, not in death but in life, the crease between their eyebrows when excitement outran caution, the small, hard joy of getting numbers to line up in patterns that meant the universe had told you a secret. Then it shows you the muzzle flash again, short as a blink. The lesson isn't subtle. Hope attracts predators. You put your hands on the table so he can see they're steady. No. His smile thins like a wire. Bad choice, he says softly, the kind of softness that keeps close company with certainty. He nods toward the street. You might be able to hide from people. You can't hide from physics. The thing inside you is a beacon. Will find you wherever you go. Then he tilts his head, not toward the door, but toward the crowd. But you're not the only one who can hear its call. Presence stiffens inside you, a temperature drop across your thoughts. You don't have to look, you know where to look. A table over, a man's head snaps toward you as if your name were a magnet. His eyes catch the light wrong there and gone, two cold pinpricks that turn a friendly color into a diagnosis. His hands flutter once, like he's listening to an earpiece only he can hear. The air around him grows thinner, as if his body is learning a new weather. The woman behind him drops a spoon and doesn't notice. He stands with a carefulness you recognize as controlled breakage. You didn't just find me, you say to the man across from you. You made more. He shrugs and the gesture lands with bureaucratic grace. We studied candidates who showed signal echoes. Some took, some didn't. Unstable hosts fail in interesting ways. We prefer stable ones, but unstable ones are useful too. He picks up his phone without looking away. Shall we call this your escort service? The presence inside you doesn't tell you to run. It doesn't tell you to fight. It inventories the room, counts doors, clocks bodies, measures the distance between you and the person who was a person a minute ago and is now an instrument tuned to your frequency. It lays 3 paths across your thoughts like transparent maps. Leave through the kitchen, fold into the crowd and let the noise carry you, or sit perfectly still and let the unstable signal choose someone else. None of these are kind. You stand. The chair legs scrape the floor and sound too loud. Conversations pause in polite shock and then resume with the manic speed of people pretending they didn't hear anything at all. The man with the purple glimmer takes a step toward you. He's breathing like he learned how this morning. At the window, the woman with the forgotten scarf adjusts it and tips her chin, receiving instructions from an empty corner of air. You think of the 5, how the world respects you on the 5th B. At how the angles sometimes align if you are very still and very cruel to your fear. You count once, twice. The presence doesn't count for you, it counts with you. On 3, the humming in your jaw becomes a line you could walk. On 4, the retriever across from you smiles, sure that all choices lead to the same door, his. On 5, the room tilts a degree to the left in a way only you notice, and you step in the direction that belongs to you. You step out of the cafe into heat that feels like a hand on the back of your neck, and the city pretends not to notice you. It's kind, it's lying. Behind you, a chair scrapes and the first of them moves, too careful like a puppet who knows about strings now. You walk fast, they walk fast. You run, they don't sprint, they converge. These aren't zombies, they are echoes. Broken people filled with a pain and a hunger they don't understand. All they know is that you have what they lost and they will rip you to pieces to get it back. The thought is yours, the certainty is not. It arrives with the cold, administrative clarity of the thing that shares your lungs. They don't want your death, they want your access, reconnection, a word that tastes like metal. You cut through an alley where balconies lean into gossip and laundry lines write cursive across the sky. A motorbike blocks your way, fallen on its side like a sleeping animal. Behind you, footfalls stutter to a halt and then resume in unison, a sound with no one conductor. The failed host from the cafe, mid-40s, face like it used to smile, comes first, head cocked as if listening to a radio inside his chest. 2 more spill in from the street, jerky grace, their gazes sluicing past everything that isn't you. Their faces are not blank, they're full of anguish that refuse to pick a shape. That's somehow worse. You lunge over the bike, it grabs your pant leg with a hand that used to be a throttle. You wriggle free and feel the skin on your shin complain. The alley dead ends at a metal gate chain but loose. Your hand goes for the bolt before you even see it. Not luck. A nudge. The entity maps the hinge in your head before your eyes. The gate yawns just enough for your ribs to count through. You squeeze and the chain snarls and the metal squeals, and behind you, 5 fingers touch the gate at the same time like they practiced. The hand doesn't grab, it presses like a believer touching a relic. "Please," the man says, but the voice isn't plead. It's a raw scrape of need with nothing human left to hang it on. The warehouse beyond is an echo chamber of long, empty afternoons. You run through rows of pallets that remember weight, dust blooming underfoot like tired applause. The hunter's movements keep glitching into coordination, then scattering, then reassembling like a swarm testing formations. A woman's foot slips and drags, the man adjusts his stride to catch her, neither of them looks at the other. You cut left because left is a relief to your knees and because the presence composes 3 paths in your mind and throws light on that one. Probability 0.34 of interception, decreasing, 0.62 if you panic, 0.05 if you stop. You don't stop. Stress accelerates the braid. The entity opens doors you didn't know were there. The world overlays itself with options, corridors that were walls, windows that are one hard shove from agreement, gaps that your body can become if you promise. You start to see faint trails hanging in air where the hunters have just been, strands of almost color like the idea of violet, heatless cold. Their paths weave toward you the way a plant weaves toward light. You position your body between threads. They overshoot, stutter, retune. You make the street and fold into a crowd that's busy staying alive in the ordinary way. A bus exhales. A child argues with a balloon. Your heart tries to go hard. The presence shaves the rhythm down until it becomes a tool you can carry. In the press of bodies, the echoes move like sharks in shallow water, visible only when they break the surface. Their eyes have the wrong reflections. Every time the sun hits a window, you have to check if the purple in the glass is glass or omen. You dart into a station with stairs that widen into a mouth. Down, down again. The smell of iron and damp concrete, electricity and old rain. On the platform, you feel them before you see them, the way the air tightens when a storm is about to introduce itself. A train arrives with the rush of a decision and you board sideways, a crab into a new shell. Doors close on a sleeve, someone tuts and pulls free. You brace for the old man who will fall, but he doesn't. The echoes don't push. They glide. The car rocks and your bones remember turbulence and do not overreact. You keep your back to a pole and watch reflections more than faces. The entity does arithmetic across the ad posters, vector sums, velocity estimates, the slight tilt in a woman's head 2 cars down that predicts the moment she'll stand. Your vision narrows and widens on command. Door chime. The echoes enter the next car, dragging attention with them, strangling the sound of talking into polite silence. They smell with something that isn't a nose. They're not hunting your body. They're hunting your signal. One of them, teenager, too young for this, a smiley face sticker still stuck to his shoe, locks on. He moves in a stuttering lurch, pauses, calibrates, lurches again. Hi. S hands keep flexing, not fists, palms open, ready to press, to seal, to connect. You dismount at the last second, doors kissing your shoulder as they close. He meets the glass with both hands. You meet his eyes, and for a fractured breath you're not repulsed. You're seen by someone whose seeing was weaponized. You exit into a tunnel that claims to be under repair and therefore perfect. The entity fans your options like cards. It anchors your breath to the 5. On 3, you drop your bag to confuse their pathing models. On 4, you cut through a service door that was meant to be locked but didn't quite remember how. On 5, you slide into a maintenance corridor where the air is a decade old and the lights prefer to be one short. You run your fingers along the wall and feel the building hum in the key of fear. Up again into light that crowns everything too honestly. The city's alleys become a diagram in your head. This one conducts sound, that one traps it. This corner hides you from a human eye, that corner hides you from the other kind. The entity shows you intersections as if they were sentences you can punctuate. You take out a wheeled dumpster and leave it askew. You knock over a stack of crates that fall in a rhythm that imitates footsteps continuing. You hang your jacket on a jutting pipe 20 meters ahead so it will describe you without containing you. The echoes catch up to false scent and fold around it, pressing their hands to empty fabric like they're blessing a saint. You're no longer just the prey, you're learning to be a predator. You count doors by the absence of their hinges. You count cameras and blink when they blink. You hear the retrievers in the distance, too. Not feet, strategy. Vehicles that don't commit. Radios that decide and undecide. They're hurting you without touching you, as if trust were a fence. You bolt into a loading bay where light forgets how to land. A chain-link cage guards a storage room that someone forgot to lock properly. You slip inside and yank the door half-closed so it will look like choice. Then you wait, which is the hardest thing you do all day. Your breath tries to draft. The present smooths it. It presses the 5 into your palm like a coin. He comes, the man from the cafe. He's faster now, or maybe closer to the signal. His walk is almost natural until it isn't. His head tilts toward you with an insect's concentration. You see the halo of thread lines around his body, the faint psychic trails he leaves behind like contrails in cold air. You see where those threads want to go, into you. He steps into the cage and the door snags the last inch on its rail. He doesn't notice. He raises his hands like a priest. When he speaks, 2 voices timeshare his mouth. Hole, he says, and the word breaks in the middle. Please. No malice hits you, no triumph. Only a psychic scream of pain and confusion, a howl fed back into itself so many times it learned to stand upright. He isn't a trap, he's a symptom. The desire is not his and also absolutely his. He moves forward the way a magnet moves a nail. You step back once, twice, and then your heel finds purchase on the cage's lower rail. You grip with both hands and wrench it. The metal judders, shifts, bites. It closes 3 centimeters. Not much. Enough. He reaches, his fingers comb the air an inch from your chest and stop, held back by nothing that should have stopped them. The entity inside you surfaces like a cold current rising. It doesn't push him away. It reaches. The air tightens. The hair on your arms tells you the weather changed inside the room. For a moment there is overlap, not a merge, a diagnostic. You see through his eyes and wish you hadn't. The world is a jigsaw with pieces from incompatible boxes. Angles refuse their responsibilities. People's faces smear into placeholders unless they're you. Sound breaks into facets that cut. The 5 are everything. The purple lives in the whites of his eyes. In his head, a single directive drowns all nouns. Connect. Not to heal, to stop the screaming. You pull back because compassion is as dangerous as cruelty now. The entity withdraws like a tide. He sways. For an instant he looks like himself, a man whose favorite part of the day used to be first coffee. Hurts, he whispers, his own voice finding a path. Make it, and then the directive reasserts. He lunges. The cage snags him enough that you slip past, heart in your mouth, science in your veins. You run. You run until running becomes a verb the day is tired of. You climb into air that tastes like rain and city. You stop in a narrow court between buildings where plants keep trying. Your hands shake with the adrenaline your other pulse doesn't respect. You want to cry, and the presence offers a memory of methane waves instead, as if giving you a calmer horizon will do. It isn't working, not like this. They will keep coming because you're loud to them in a frequency no wall can mute. The entity shows you, unasked, a map of nowhere with a single star on it, the coordinates you've already followed once, the crash site, not because it is sentimental, because it is source. The field that began there didn't end when the paper said it did. That's where all the threads still knot. That's where you untie them or let them bin. You to everything forever. Your feet already know the way. Your fear already has the shape of the route. You stand at the place where your life ended and began again. This is a graveyard, but you're here for a birth, a final goodbye. You have to let it go, even if it means letting go of yourself. Wind moves through the broken field like breath through a sleeping giant. The memorial plaques shine with names that learn to be numbers. Bouquets are paper dry, their colors turned into memory. You step over the rope line because grief doesn't respect stanchions, and neither does destiny once it thinks it recognizes you. The wreckage looks smaller than the night you remember. That's what distance does, it shrinks catastrophe until you can walk around it. But up close, the metal knows what it survived. The skin of the Dreamliner has curled into sculptures of heat, ribs reach for a sky they didn't expect to touch. You lay your palm on a torn section of fuselage and feel a faint answering chill climb your wrist. It's not haunted, it's conductive. The plan isn't yours alone. It arrives in you like a proof you can't quite write down. The twisted hull is a waveguide, the frames and spars a lattice, the miles of copper that once fed lights and instruments now a nervous system waiting for a signal. The ground beneath is ground in every sense of the word. You can hear the math of it more than you think it. You can feel how a broadcast might stand on this skeleton and step into the dark again if someone brave or foolish enough would strike the tuning fork. Maintain orientation, the memory says. You place your other hand on a rib and your feet into their own geometry, one heel on earth, one toe on metal, closing a circuit between what falls and what escapes. The city keeps its distance. It has learned to cross the street when it passes this place, but word travels faster than sirens and predators are punctual. Headlights flower beyond the barrier, then flick off like eyes shuddering to hunt better. Figures spill into the margins, the corporate agents with their tidy jackets and bored faces, the retriever whose smile peels on and off like tape, and from the dark edges the others, the echoes of Flight 171 drawn the way filings find a magnet. They don't chant, they don't hiss. They just move toward you with hands like questions, palms open, ready to connect. A three-way battle written in three kinds of appetite. You can't possibly think, the retriever begins, but you've stopped needing his words. You count the 5 because the 5 always answer. On 1, the presence inside you steps forward through your skin. The air cools in a radius like a shadow with temperature. On 2, a hum gathers in the torn metal under your hands, low at first like a train a horizon away. On 3, the hum finds pitch. A purple knotlight threads the seams and rivet lines as if remembering a path it once took as electricity. Agents stall. Hunters sway. Even birds revise their plans. On 4, geometry arrives. Patterns sketch themselves across the curved shell, triangles that refuse to be Euclidean, arcs that know secrets about circles. It isn't spectacle, it's language. The lattice of the fuselage answers back with its own grammar, the way a cathedral admits sound and turns it holy. The entity moves through you like a conductor lifting a baton, and the wreckage responds, a choir made of alloy and accident. On 5, you begin. Sound is mostly silence, the kind that bends air. Your bones vibrate in microtones, your teeth harmonize out of loyalty. A soft purple radiance crawls outward from your hands, climbs the skeleton of the plane, and knits the broken pieces together not to heal them but to let them speak. The hunters stop mid-step, heads tilting as one, the pain in their faces softening into focus. They were hungry. Now they are listening. The agents look smaller, their authority reduced to a wrong tool in a right moment. The retriever's mouth is a line that has learned to be afraid. You call it what it wants, release. You don't have the word in your language, so you borrow one from math. Continue. The entity pours itself through the piano wires of your nerves, through the copper out of the torn belly into the ribs and skin, up the curve toward the open sky. You are the modulator, the impulse, the wick. Heat rises through you and leaves no burn. Cold settles in your lungs and leaves no frost. Your heart agrees to beat on a borrowed rhythm that fits your chest better than it should. Memories thread your vision as you become the antenna, crystal forests under twin suns, methane oceans sighing their tectonic sigh, a cavern where light grew teeth because no one told it not to, a billion years of solitude catalogued with the care of a librarian who never had a patron. You should be terrified. You are, and you are also relieved. You weren't made to carry a universe. No one is. but you can host the door for a moment and you can hold it open with your own life if you must. The agents advance because habit tells them to. One raises something that would be a weapon if this were a story about bullets. In the humming purple, it looks like a toy. The retriever shouts a name he thinks is yours like names could compete with physics. The echoes come close enough for breath to fog, and you feel no malice radiating from them, only ache, only the raw pull of a signal they were never built to absorb. You lift a hand, only a hand, and the pattern on the metal answers. Lines arc from your fingertips, skittering along torn skin, and the air presses the crowd back without touching them. You are not attacking. You are tuning. This is a requiem. It will not be interrupted by paperwork. The presence inside you finds something heavier than logic to lay in your chest, gratitude, not as a word, as a weight that fits where sadness lived. For the first time in a billion years, it is not alone. For the first time in your life, neither are you. There's a risk in this. Love is always an opening, and you accept it the way you once accepted safety instructions you didn't think you'd need. You close your eyes because eyes are a human indulgence and this part doesn't require them. Let go, you tell yourself, and for once the voice in your head agrees on the pronoun. We. The wreckage brightens by degrees until night itself pays attention. The hum climbs into silence so perfect it becomes sound again. A single, noiseless beam of purple tears upward from the torn fuselage, not fire, not light, a vector given visible body. It lances into the sky, through smog, through air lanes, past weather, past the polite blue shell that keeps most of us home, and keeps going the way truth keeps going after you stop telling it. For an instant, the world is a tuning fork struck by a hand as old as stars. The hunters crumple like marionettes whose strings were set on a table, not broken, released. Their faces slacken into sleep in which pain finally has nothing to do. Around you, agents stagger, weapons lowered by a force they will one day call resonance because that sounds like they controlled it. The retriever watches the beam narrow, his prize evaporating into something you can't invoice. He stares hard enough to bruise a future. It won't help. In the middle of it, you feel yourself thin, not dying, translating. The entity moves through the gate you've made and does something impossible and polite. It leaves a room for you to stay. A lighter room than before, more echo than architecture. It packs in a single feeling as it goes, a small stone for your pocket, thank you. It fits next to the other stone you've carried since the crash, sorry. Weight returns to your body all at once and none at all. Your knees decide to be honest. You fall. The ground rises with practical mercy. Around you, the last of the light dissolves into dark again. The purple lingers behind your eyelids like a promise you're not strong enough to keep twice. You think if this is death, it is kinder than I was told. You think if this is life, it is emptier and somehow more mine. You think nothing at all. Dawn wakes you before you decide to wake. You're lying on cool grass, the memorial plaques nearby glinting like patient constellations. Your clothes are damp with night. Your hands are empty. Your head quiet, not the unnatural hush from the plane. This is the simple, hollow silence of absence. The ghost has left the machine. You are free. You sit up slowly, as if the earth is a friend you don't want to startle. The world is ordinary in a way that feels almost obscene. A bird arguing with a wire, the first bus sighing itself into a root, a breeze that belongs to no one. You listen for the thrum in your jaw out of habit, and what you find instead is just your heartbeat doing its small, loyal job. The angles around you behave like angles again. No whisper lives at the edge of hearing. You are alone in the way the living are alone, and it lands in your chest with the dull ache of a weight finally set down. Emergency vehicles thread into the field, all lights and etiquette. People in uniforms talk to other people in uniforms. The echoes, the hunters, are on the ground, sleeping a sleep they were owed. The corporate agents stand around their own bewilderment like it's a piece of equipment they forgot how to use. Voices ping back and forth, paperwork runs toward the scene with its laces untied. A drone thinks about being helpful. No one looks at you twice. You are just another face leaving a place where other faces will become statements. It is almost funny if you squint. After becoming a frequency, the reward is invisibility. You walk, the rope line means nothing going out. The city receives you without ceremony. Coffee happens in a cup that burns your fingers a little because you forgot how to hold heat. Your phone still knows your name. You buy a toothbrush because this is what people do when they've come back from somewhere unspeakable. They add bristles to their lives. You sleep 12 hours and dream nothing, and for the first time since the plane you don't wake gasping. Freedom tastes like tap water and unsalted bread and is, against all odds, delicious. Months arrange themselves without permission. You move apartments. You let plants try to live, some do. You learn the names of the people who sell you fruit and the cat who owns the alley and the patch of sun that belongs to your window at 4 in the afternoon. You forget to be afraid all the time. Sometimes you remember on purpose just to make sure you still can. When it rains, you stand near the window and listen to the sound start brave, then get tired, then try again. The 5 become a superstition you no longer need. The mirror holds your face without insisting on a second outline. You keep your promise to ordinary life until it becomes a muscle you can use without thinking. You go a week without saying the word crash. You go 2 without thinking entity. When someone asks about the white scar on your wrist, you say kitchen and mean it. The world is generous in its forgettings. One evening the algorithm tries to be helpful, as algorithms do. A thumbnail finds you when you weren't looking for it. A documentary about Flight 171, labeled with the same responsible language and irresponsible speculation you've come to expect. What if the title asks like it's offering you a drink? You should scroll past. You don't. You press play because no one is here to be brave for, and self-sabotage can pass for companionship if you squint. The video opens with that tone you recognize, a tightrope between reverence and rumor. Old footage, a map bent to someone's purpose, a diagram of a plane that now exists as metal turned into sculpture. You listen to the narrator like you would to a stranger telling your story on a bus. Then the voice reaches a corner and turns, familiar in a way that stings, not similar, familiar. He speaks about the cover-up, the lab in the sub-basement, the purple bloom in a chamber where light misbehaved, the retrievers who prefer trophies that can't testify. He says, you walk into that cafe knowing it's a trap. The words land with the memory of your own mouth shaping them. He says, the thing inside you isn't evil, and you taste metal the way you did when you said that sentence alone in your apartment. He says, you stand at the place where your life ended and began again, and your body remembers grass and sirens and gratitude heavy as a hand. It's this video. You pause and the room waits, practiced at patience. You press play because some loops want finishing. On-screen, the narrator says, and what of the sole survivor, the one who became the host, the beacon? Some say they died setting the entity free, but I believe something different. You look down at your hands because the script in your chest tells you to. Under the skin, faint geometric patterns stir and fade, glowing the way a memory glows when a particular song finds it. Not bright, not hungry. Just there, like a watermark the paper forgot to hide. You close your eyes and listen into the cue. You it like you used to listen for the trains, and there it is, so slight you could pretend. A new echo from far away, threaded with distance and contentment. Not a command. A call and response from a friend who learned the word friend from you. The void clearing its throat. You breathe and the breath doesn't echo anymore. It rings and fades, small and human and good. The voice in the video, the voice you know, continues, and you hear yourself say it the same way you once said maintain orientation, not as an order but as a prayer. I believe they became something more. A receiver, forever tuned to the sounds of the void. Because the truth is, you can't cover up a story that's still being written. The screen goes dark because you close your laptop, not because the world demanded drama. The room doesn't tilt. The angles don't argue. You stand at the window and watch the night finish happening. Somewhere above the cloud line and the busy routes and the polite blue, a stranger you made less lonely is writing its chapter. Down here, you rinse a mug and put it on the rack and let it drip dry, a choreography so wonderfully small it feels like grace. You are just you again. You are not just you. Both statements can be true. The silence, finally, is yours to keep.